can begin. So ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to this online seminar of the Central Asia program at the George Washington University. My name is Marlene Laurel. I'm the director of the Central Asia program, and it's my great pleasure to receive you today to discuss the current situation in Uzbekistan. And so we will be discussing here both the constitutional reform, the tensions that have been created, the situation in Karakalpakstan, and with us we have three great experts joining us, and I'm really grateful they could find time for this seminar in the middle of the summer. We have with us Navbahor Imamova, who is the editor and producer of Uzbek service at Voice of America, Temur Umarov, fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and the OSCE Academy in Bishkek, and Akram Umarov, director of the Afghanistan Research Group and associate professor at the University of World Economy and Diplomacy in Tashkent. We should have had with us Yuri Sarukhanyan, but unfortunately he had a last minute family issues. So in case he would be joining us, I will be giving him the floor, but I'm afraid he won't be able to do it. But the three of you will be a great expert to explain us what has been happening recently in Uzbekistan. So I would like first to give the floor to Navbahor to give us your first assessment. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. It's great to be part of this important discussion, Marlene. So thank you for organizing this, for having me here with these brilliant folks. Akram and Temur, I have enormous respect for their work as a reporter and of your work as well. And it's an honor and pleasure to share my views and insights as a journalist, as an observer. I'm a proud VOA journalist, but I will not be speaking on behalf of my organization here. I am really speaking as someone who's been covering these issues, and I would just start off by saying that Karakalpakstan case is the story of today's Uzbekistan through and through. And I know many in Tashkent won't like the description of this, but what happened in Nukus early July put this part of the world on the map. And it increased the attention to what's happening inside Uzbekistan, where reforms were announced in 2017, and how and to what extent those reforms then have been changing the country. It's a story of economic and social injustice. It's a story of the distrust between the state/regime and the people. It's a story of poverty and corruption. It's a story of political confusions and contradictions. And we've heard that many Karakalpaks from many Karakalpaks that they're actually more angry at their local leaders than those in Tashkent. So that is itself a bigger story here that we also need to focus. The Karakalpak part of the Uzbek constitution is not changing. We know that much. But the arguments about it, the disagreement on the status of Karakalpakstan, the constitutional guarantee to the Karakalpak people will continue to be debated inside and outside the country. And the government will have to address these issues. So just by canceling the changes to the constitution, I will argue will not be enough at all. Is Karakalpakstan really an autonomy? Can you have a sovereign state within a sovereign state? Can actually Karakalpaks have the kind of a referendum that the Uzbek constitution guarantees them in reality? Uzbekistan is a highly centralized unitary government where you cannot hold regional referendums. It's legally impossible if you look at the rest of the Uzbek constitution. So how can you have a dialogue now that discusses those issues? These are very internal issues, and we realize that the Uzbek government doesn't want to discuss all these issues on international arenas, perhaps, but I would argue that you have to still address them. You cannot ignore these realities. And then, you have this group called Karakalpak activists. Tashkent can call them separatists or, all they want, but they exist. And they have a louder voice now. There is more interest in their plight now. They'll continue to fight what they believe in. And this is something that the Uzbek government cannot ignore. And because these calls are about Uzbekistan's territorial integrity, it's about its sovereignty and stability, one of the biggest challenges I see for the government in the near future is to come up with a strategy that addresses these issues, and that also addresses and deals with this critical Karakalpak public now, inside and outside Uzbekistan. So what does the Mirziyoev administration, think about the 1990 declaration on the sovereignty of Karakalpakstan? How about the 1993 agreement that was made with the Karakalpak people that was supposed to be reviewed in 20 years that, the system forgot? Tashkent needs to explain its position. So far, what I have heard from some lawmakers and policymakers, as well as lawyers from Tashkent, is that the Uzbek constitution is the best answer. That is Tashkent's position. Whatever the Uzbek constitution, the main law of the country says, that's the answer. But I think you need to go deeper. You need to elaborate. You need to start that conversation, because Karakalpaks have questions. They have demands. And, Tashkent may call them destructive forces in general. And so far, that's what we have heard from the government. They can sideline them, but will that then ensure Uzbekistan's stability? What happens to the critical voices when you don't engage them? Or will Karakalpak activists become what we see the so-called Uzbek opposition as? Tashkent calls them irrelevant. Do you want to have irrelevant group of people who have a huge impact on the minds of their fellow Karakalpaks back at home? If they're calling, let's say, these, foreign-based Karakalpaks destructive forces. So again, the government needs to really think there. Cutting people off from the world by cutting them off the internet, is that something that Uzbekistan wants to be doing? What does that say about your reforms? What does that say about your promotion of new Uzbekistan? How are you going to convince the world that you're open for business when you can really completely shut a huge part of the country from online communication? Everyone I talk to in the Mirziyoev administration now tells me that President Mirziyoev has strictly instructed everybody to respect human rights and to do everything that they can so that Uzbekistan meets its international obligations. That means that the Caucus investigation has to be as credible, as independent, as impartial as possible. So now we have this commission investigating what's happened, what happened to Nukus right there in Karakalpakstan at this point, and the commission is led by the Uzbek ombudsman Firuze Ishmatova. It is a parliamentary probe. Let's just call it that. It is a parliamentary probe. It will report to the parliament. It's being done by the Uzbek people for the Uzbek people. And I hear Uzbek lawmakers who argue that it's okay that it doesn't include any foreign experts. It doesn't have to. It's our investigation. Fine. But what that commission then delivers may not be enough for the international community. It may not be enough at all to meet Uzbekistan's international obligations. So then the next question, will Uzbekistan open for foreign experts? Will they be engaging international groups? And then my question to these international human rights organizations who've been calling on social media so far for, deeper, more independent investigation, are you ready to carry that out yourselves? It's one thing to call for such things online and, through social media or maybe in your conversations with Uzbek officials, but in reality, it's not easy to carry out such investigations, such probes. So, is there enough unity and solidarity within the human rights community to do something like that? And also many Uzbek thinkers have been telling us that Uzbekistan now needs to focus on national identity promotion, national integration, which is also, I think, is very crucial. Uzbekistan needs to start that very uncomfortable conversation about diversity and minority rights and inter-ethnic dynamics, something that we don't have such a dialogue in the country now. Uzbek state media, which is really, which are still dominant, for example, don't carry such content. I mean, forget about news and analytical coverage. The most watched, the most popular Uzbek TV shows are in broken Tashkent dialect. I mean, they're not relevant to the rest of the country at all, but people still watch them. That is the projection of diversity in Uzbekistan right now. And so how will that change? Also, a very important part of the conversation should also be Karakalpak intellectuals, professionals, artists, talents who have been mainly silent throughout this process. I've been, talking to some of them. They're very afraid to talk. And ironically, they're the active, some of them are very active promoters of the new Uzbekistan. They've been doing the state propaganda, but now they cannot express their own views. They cannot share their own analysis about the motherland. Will that change in the coming days? And it should. You should bring them into, that conversation. And finally, I think it's crystal clear by now that this was a major historic miscalculation by the leadership. The promotion of constitutional reforms pushed personally by President Mirziyoev, and there was nothing wrong with it when he proposed to do this, after his re-election in November 2021. Well, he got re-elected in October, but in his speech, in November, those reforms have been coined as the will of the Uzbek people, and that backfired in Karakalpakstan. That was another really, I would argue, major failure. You should have called them what they are. President Mirziyoev is proposing these constitutional reforms. Do we want them? Instead, it was promoted as the will of the Uzbek people. And it backfired in Karakalpakstan, in the most poorest, remote, and least probably known part of Uzbekistan. There is this internal political turmoil here, which I believe President Mirziyoev is dealing with. I hear that he's cleaning house, that there will be more, changes in the administration. Let's see, this is a major test. Will these constitutional reforms continue as if everything is okay, or will there be a rethinking, re-strategizing? Will there be deeper analysis? Thousands of people came out protesting in a country where a lot of us have argued all along that something like this would never happen. And Tashkent should not be surprised. They should know. They should know what was happening in Karakalpakstan. And if this is not a clear indication that the current strategy needs to be reviewed, I would argue, what else? Like, what else do you need for Uzbekistan to happen, for you to review this current, let's say, push for constitutional reforms? I'll end here and look forward to hearing from my co-panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Navbahor, for launching the discussion like that on so many critical issues. I saw that we are lucky Yuri could join us. So let me introduce him, Yuri Sarukhanyan, who is an international relations specialist, but also the author of the analytical Telegram channel, Syria Penalty. Yuri, thank you so much for joining us in a difficult condition for you today. I wanted to give you the floor immediately in case you wouldn't be able to stay with us for the whole duration of the event, and then we will go back to Temur and Akram. Yuri.
Good evening. No, I will be able to stay with you the whole event, so we can stick with the agenda.
Okay, very good. So then maybe Temur, would you like to go second?
Thank you very much for having me. It's a huge honor to be here alongside with Navbahor, Yuri, Akram, and you, Marlene. Yes, first of all, I want to also add to what Navbahor has already said. As someone who is considered to be ethnic minority in Uzbekistan, I'm from Samarkand, ethnically Tajik. I also, feel what is it like to be, someone whose language is not official language, as someone who's watching TV and cannot watch TV in Tajik, as someone who walks on the streets and cannot see signs in Tajik and thinks that Tajik is only the language that you can speak at home. This feels, strange, and I think in this regard, there should be done some changes in the policies of Uzbekistan. But I wanted to scale out a little bit and to look at why this miscalculation has been made by the political regime. And in my view, I think the number one and maybe most important problem that we see here is that the political leadership underestimated the results of the reform it started itself. when Shavkat Mirziyoev came to power. Because if we compare how society lived during the last years of Islam Karimov and how society lives today, we will see that these are two almost different societies. The middle age in Uzbekistan is 29 years old. So we can say that the biggest chunk of the population of Uzbekistan does not really remember the times that were, before last 5 years. For them, their most active part of their lives are happening in this very dynamic Uzbekistan that is very open to the world and claims to be, really democratic as never before. And they live in completely different country. They use internet daily. There are more than 18 million internet users in Uzbekistan. They, if they don't like something, they go to protests. If we look at the Caucus Society database, we will see that from 2018 to 2021, there were more than 200 protests across Uzbekistan. If they don't like something, they go to Facebook and write directly, to the government agencies and tag everyone that can be tagged, go to media and talk about their problems. They know different Uzbekistan. And what I think is that the leadership doesn't understand that while you live in this situation with this society, you cannot act like classic authoritarian country during Islam Karimov. And what the constitutional reforms and the changes in the constitution are all about is it's all done with the old instruments. The government wants people to believe that it is them who wants the constitutional reforms. It is them who wants to give the president more power, according to the project of the constitution that has been published before the Karakalpak events. And this is completely wrong because it feels like the government is kind of lives in illusion and doesn't really understand its own society, doesn't really understand what are the problems that people on the ground face. And because of that, the decisions that are made in Tashkent are sometimes really wrong. And what is more important is that I do believe that Uzbekistan saw what was happening all across Eurasia, all across post-Soviet space. We saw what was happening, for example, in January 2022 in Kazakhstan. And that at that moment shocked everyone, and especially shocked everyone in Uzbekistan. We remember how President Mirziyoev even stopped his January vacation for that, and there were measures taken in Uzbekistan for coping with some potential protest crossing the border of Kazakhstan to Uzbekistan. But what strikes me the most is that the leadership looks so closely for the events outside of the country, but does not really investigates and analyzes what's going on inside. I don't believe that there is some secret agency inside Uzbek government that knows what's going on everywhere in Uzbekistan. And since I don't see any public discussions about the political developments, about the problems on the ground, I do believe that there is no real good analysis that is out there inside Uzbekistan that can be used in the decision-making process. And the problem where we don't have it is that the government does not allow it to happen. When, for example, my friend Yuri, who's also here, published great piece, analytical piece on Gazeta.ru about the Karakalpak events, we saw that this article was deleted for a couple of hours. These instruments does not work in modern Uzbekistan. And at this moment, it's already too late to, go back to say that, oh my God, we are too far with these reforms. We have to go back to those calm years where we could do whatever we want with the society, and the society will take it. Now it's different. And now, if the government wants to continue to be stable, I think there should be done more work on developing the politology, developing the expert community, giving more money to universities, and trying to understand your own society, your own problems, and to focus on that much more than it is, happening right now. I'll stop here and we'll be happy to answer any questions if you have.
Thank you so much, Timur, for your remarks. I now would like to give the floor to Akram to continue our discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much for this for the invitation, and I'm very happy to be part of this excellent panel of speakers. I think while analyzing this situation in Karakalpakstan, we should focus on several issues. I think first of all, the roots of this crisis. Obviously, they didn't appear suddenly. There were deep causes of the problem, and they gradually constructed for decades. I don't think that this is something which happened in a couple of weeks or even a couple of months or years. I think the situation in Karakalpakstan, as many people know, the social economic situation is not the best one, even in comparatively to other regions of Uzbekistan. Because of this Aral Sea crisis and the following social economic degradation, people were suffering for many years because of the social economic problems, and actually many people left the country. Yeah, they left either to other provinces of Uzbekistan or left the country as migrants or relocants to other parts of the world. And also because of this ecological crisis and lack of resources, also people had much worse living conditions comparative to other parts of Uzbekistan. I think when there was a change of leadership in 2016, there was understanding how situation is bad in Karakalpakstan. I think that's why the first visit after this first election of Mirziyoev, he did his first internal visit to Karakalpakstan. And he declared about the strategy to invest in Karakalpakstan and to try to modernize it. And then there were some attempts to modernize. There were capital investments, I think in 5 years, 2016, 2012, 21, there were investments equal to $1 billion. So capital investments in the infrastructure of Karakalpakstan, in creating new factories and etc. So this Muinak, the big town, which was quite populated during the Soviet time, but then due to the Aral Sea issue, many people left its town. It didn't have a proper water supply. Yeah, there was no proper water supply, and the water supply was provided just in end of 2017, I think. And recently, they built a small airport in this town. I think there is understanding about the problems of Karakalpakstan, and there was an attempt to improve the situation. There is a very traditional stuff in Uzbekistan. The president gathered all hakims and made them responsible for the hakims of other vilayats of Uzbekistan, province of Uzbekistan. They were responsible for each district of Karakalpakstan. So to help these districts to improve their infrastructure and make some renovation. And it's also establish region-to-region contacts. But the problem with this, I'm going to my second point. Yes, there were attempts to improve the situation and to respond to the increasing challenges and this direction. But the problem with all these things, with all this investment, there is no proper monitoring and evaluation. There is no proper assessment. To what extent these investments were efficient, and to what extent, what kind of other steps we could do in the situation. I fully agree with Temur about lack of independent expertise and analysis. I think this was the biggest challenge for all these reforms, and not just Karakalpakstan, but for all other areas as well. So we need, why there were no prediction about social moods of people. There were no sociological surveys. There were no analysis of internal politics. Yeah, there are some small branches in public think tanks who deal with internal politics, but the current situation again demonstrates that either they do not have necessary capacity, or I don't know what are the reasons why they couldn't predict. Because obviously after the announcement of these changes, Karakalpak social media were kind of burning. Yeah, so many people expressed that they do not support these changes and they would like to keep the current version. And this didn't find a proper response from central government. I think there was an obvious lack of communication, and this leads to the issue of, again, the capacity of political institutions. When I wrote a small piece about Kazakhstan in January, I said this was the biggest challenge to the Central Asian region in its 30 years history. But now we can see there is this kind of internal unrest is happening, and that happened in Kazakhstan and then in Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. Or in general, of course, there are different reasons and different roots of these problems, but in general, it showed that we are still in the process of building our political institutions. We still need to do more on providing more transparency, more accountability, and also to have this independent expertise and analysis. And all these things could be easily prevented if there were proper understanding of the problem, and also analyzing internal politics. There were also issue of appointing proper merit-based people in Karakalpak government, in other structures which deal with this part of the country. Because on what happened and the next my point is the main thing which I think we should try to do in the current situation to prevent any kind of to move this problem to the ethnic problem, inter-ethnic problem, the Uzbek Karakalpak kind of some issues. On a bottom level, on a people-to-people level, I don't see any problems on relation with Karakalpak. I have many colleagues in my university. I have many friends in Tashkent and other provinces of Uzbekistan who are ethnically Karakalpak, and we are friends. We have no problems on this level. I think that the main thing now I could see in many social media that the attempts to push this problem to the point of having a kind of inter-ethnic, to give it inter-ethnic dimension. I think this is very big threat for our security, and I think, and actually this is not true. Yeah, and again the problem is this proper assessment. And finally, about international reaction, I think we could see that this regional cooperation is developing, because on these days you could see that there were back-to-back phone calls with all regional of Mr. Mirziyoev with all the regional leaders, and they had discussed the problem, the issue, and they all expressed support to Uzbekistan. Also other countries, even the statements which had kind of criticism of Uzbekistan from the statements of State Department and EU, they were quite moderate. I think no one is actually interested now in any kind of destabilization in Central Asia, especially Uzbekistan, when it's at least show, as Temur also mentioned, it's showing some kind of intention to modernize itself. And there are still many problems on this path, but still at the same time there is this attempt, there is a will to modernize, to change the system, to build something more efficient and effective. I think in this situation, the easiest way to respond to the crisis would be to emphasize national security, regime security, and to repeat the same mistakes which Uzbekistan made during its previous challenges to its security. But I think Uzbekistan is more now conscious about its reputation, is more conscious about establishing some communication with people, and that's why we could see some attempts to respond to all this criticism and to establish this commission. Maybe it's not ideal, but still we have this kind of commission with several independent members, and I think we should a little bit wait the initial kind of assessment of this commission before making any kind of conclusions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Akram, for your really important remarks. I will give the floor now to Yuri, and then we will, after Yuri, open the floor for the Q&A discussion, and I will moderate the discussion. As you can see, the chat is very lively, and a lot of discussion are going on also in parallel. Yuri, the floor is yours.
Good evening, colleagues. Thank you very much for the invitation and for the chance to participate in this discussion. Talking about Karakalpak crisis, I think that we should, first of all, shift from the discussion of separatism and territorial integrity issues. Second is that we should abandon inter-ethnic tensions and we should try to stop both activists, bloggers, etc., from both sides, both from Uzbek side locally, who tried to demonstrate Karakalpaks as separatists with a long-term ambitions to leave Uzbekistan, and both in Karakalpakstan, who try the activists who try to demonstrate Uzbeks and Uzbek population as the one who is oppressive and who organizes genocide, etc. For me, Karakalpak crisis is an absolute case of dispute decision-making process that Uzbekistan suffers for many years already. First of all, and second is the poor communications practices of the government. That is also an issue for many years. Why the first one? So decision-making process in Uzbekistan, if we talk even about Karakalpak crisis, nobody explained to us what was the reason of such amendments to the constitution. So if they tried to do this, they should be justified, but we don't have this justification. We can just think, yeah, we understand that we are living in a post-Soviet country, and the legitimacy of post-Soviet states is now questioned by Kremlin regime, and Kremlin regime uses such territories, such cases as Karakalpakstan, Donbass, etc., to Abkhazia, South Ossetia, to push the states. So that might be a logic of the government to prevent someone from interfering to this. But again, we never heard from them what was the main idea. So for 30 years, Karakalpakstan never suffered any separatist intentions, if there were no tensions and ambitions to leave Uzbekistan. And now, after these amendments were announced, Karakalpak agenda shifted towards we want to quit. So the decision-making process was poorly implemented. And the second one is communications. The communications with the society about the decisions made. Here in Uzbekistan, the government made a huge progress in information policy, in informing the people about their actions, like the done actions, and in promoting them. But the government is never never really engaged in communicating, because when you are communicating your decision, it means that you are trying sort of to sell to the society your agenda, to demonstrate both positive aspects, negative aspects of the decision, and just to try to persuade people that the decision is right. But what we have seen with Karakalpak amendments, they were never explained. They were never truly communicated to Karakalpak society, because you never you never announce such amendments to a territory with to an ethnic territory in your country, that you just abolish some sort of a status without without preliminary discussions with these people, without attracting opinion leaders of this ethnos, and etc. And the next, so I would like to specify that we had already such mini crisis caused by this poor decision-making process. It's not, of course, comparable to Karakalpak one, but I remember a few years ago, I don't know if it was 2017 or 2018, when Samarkand hosted sort of a media event. There was a task to put an order to the streets and to deal with stray animals, and they just were killed, both stray animals and domestic animals. Then we had a program on renovation of infrastructure in the cities, and so people were just forced to leave their apartments, to leave their houses without compensation, etc. Again, it was poorly implemented, it was poorly communicated. Karakalpak's crisis is the most, let's say, tragic and the most well, attractive to the media, just because we have an ethnic minority there. And I mean, it's the same logic of making mistakes in the decision-making process. Because when the amendments were announced, Karakalpak society was not really eager to launch these ambitions to quit. They were just, there was a misunderstanding. They just didn't get what is it about. And the government was silent. They thought, I think, that if they stay silent, it will just be dealt itself. But the more they were silent, the more tensions grew, and it resulted with the events of the 1st July. And as you can see, the 2nd July president came to Nukus to abolish this amendment. So, I mean, if the government did the same thing on Monday, not on Saturday, we could never have these tragic events. So again, poor implementation of the decisions and poor communication of their decisions. And the last but not least, what I would like to mention is that the government should shift from one-sided communications with the society to two-sided communications. So the government should be more attentive to the feedbacks it has on different ambitions that it declares, and try to understand what people want. But in post-Soviet area, sometimes when the government go to compromise, try to find a solution with the society, it is perceived as the weakness, because we live in such in the post-Soviet area, the heritage of Soviet area, where you have a hard power as the main indicator of force. The soft power is always is not appreciated. And here the same thing. The government should should quit this logic. If it tries to understand people and receive the feedback and improve the program, different program initiatives, etc. upon these feedbacks, it's not the weakness. On the contrary, it means that the government tries to build these lines with the people, and to build the network that can function and that can always indicate that something is going wrong. Because we don't know how the decision was made, but we definitely know that when the decision on the amendments concerning Karakalpakstan was made, nobody in the government told, like, guys, it will not end well. We should not do this. Or they told it, but they were not really influential to influence this decision. And in this case, you need the society. You need always this top-down and bottom-up communications in order to improve the program, in order to not to make silly mistakes that cause then some really tragic events. I will stop this. I will stop here, and I think we can move to the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Yuri, for your question. Listening to you, to you all, and looking at the discussion in the chat, I was thinking about the events we had in January about the Kazakh event, and I can feel the same kind of course, a gap between what is the analytical perspective and the fact that many people in the chat are really focusing on what is happening on the ground in terms of police violence, detention, you know, the way it will be investigated and so on. And I think that's just totally typical for any kind of authoritarian regime repressing a population. So it just makes me kind of putting Kazakhstan in parallel. What I also see in the four of your presentation is so several small points before taking some question is that we see a wake up from a lot of societies in the post-Soviet region, right? We had Kazakhstan, we had Belarus, right? I even don't speak about Ukraine and Russia, right? And then we see like, and I think it's Timur who is saying that like, it's a new generation, right? It's new people who have been used to live in a relatively, compared to some Soviet time period, more free in society and who are waiting from the regimes to deliver more. And I think that is that also, so there is a general kind of context. Then you have systemic political issues that all of you were mentioning, right? The point is not only Karakalpakstan, the point is just how the Uzbek regime is treating its own Uzbek citizens as a whole. And here also, as you were saying, we have a lot of issues about like reversing the top-down mechanism and finding a way to engage with society and to be more on a listening mood than on an ordering mood. Then we have systemic social economic issues. And I think it's really important for us to remember, I mean, what is Karakalpakstan, right? In terms of social economic dynamic, it's just one of the worst regions of the country. And it has been like that since always, right? So it's really a region in suffering socioeconomically, and then only then arrive, I think, the kind of the ethnic cultural aspect that make things worse, of course, received by that minority. So I saw several questions that I would like to ask you. The big one, of course, is about the impact of the crisis on the whole trajectory of the regime. Do you think that the regime will become more repressive, or will, on the contrary, understand it's a signal that needs to be taken into consideration in trying to create mechanism of discussion? The narratives about secessionism and risk of, you know, like preserving territorial sovereignty is usually not a good sign, because it's usually used, right, as a way to avoid the discussion. So that's one question that I would like to ask you. And then we had the second one that was appearing at different moments in the chat about Karakalpaks being in trouble outside of Uzbekistan. And then that posed all the question of the extraterritoriality of justice that many post-Soviet states have been doing. We know Tajikistan did that, Kazakhstan, Russia, of course, is also doing that. So it's all about like, what are the mechanisms that allows the Uzbek services to kind of hunt opponent, and that works for the whole region outside. So that would be interesting in having, for those of you who can comment on that aspect also, and then maybe we will go back on some of the very specific discussion elements we had in the chat. Who would like to begin the discussion on the kind of the impact on the trajectory of the regime?
I can start. So based on what we have seen so far, the steps, you know, in Tashkent, and also what President Mirziyoev said when he visited Nukus a couple of times, we know that, and we have, I mean, I know enough to believe that the government will have a multi-dimensional approach to this. I don't think they have a new strategy yet, but they will be addressing, I am told, the underlying grievances of Karakalpak people. and the claims of discrimination, claims that Karakalpakstan is actually not run by its parliament, as the constitution says, by the Tashkent appointed officials who don't really enjoy much credibility. I think Tashkent is reviewing the credibility of those leaders in Nukus, and in many ways Tashkent also feels a bit misled by Karakalpak leaders in Nukus. Remember that very famous quote that President Mirziyoev said, well, you guys have actually, were assuring that this is what Karakalpak people want. You are the guys who signed off on these changes. And now you're telling me that the people here were unhappy. So, and we don't know what went on between Mirziyoev and other, the leaders in Nukus, but I think what will happen next, based on what we know, is that there will be a heavy focus on security, without a doubt. And what we heard from President Mirziyoev yesterday in Cholpanata in Kyrgyzstan as well, that we need to focus on security, we need to tighten our security cooperation with the neighbors, and we know that that's already been happening with Kazakhstan, which is adjacent to Karakalpakstan. So we will see more focus on security, but I think they will also be more economic and social focus, and they will also be focused on the national integration, that this is one big happy society. And as Yuri and Temur were also arguing, that this is not interethnic. Even if it is not interethnic, Uzbeks have to deal with the Karakalpak plight. You have about, let's say you have hundreds of thousands of people silently and vocally telling to Tashkent that we're not happy. We're not happy with the way we run. We're not happy with the conditions we live in. So you cannot ignore that. And if you want to celebrate diversity, if you want to claim that you are this wonderfully tolerant, big society, you have to nourish that diversity. So a conversation about diversity is not necessarily focusing on inter-ethnic conflicts. Even if you don't have them, you have to work on them. You have to focus on them. Your media must be diverse. Your political policies, your approach must be diverse. You need to take into the account the interests of all people who live in Uzbekistan. So that's somewhere I think there are minds in Tashkent who are making that argument, but with the current team that has been focusing, let's say, on constitutional reforms, or who have, let's say, advising, President Mirziyoev to do certain things, or to how to approach Karakalpakstan, that team needs to change, because that team led to this. And if you want to, really blame anybody, there's a certain blame game going on in Tashkent, and we saw that with the firing of a very powerful chief of staff in Tashkent. And now you have a new chief of staff who seems to be, promising, and many people are actually happy with this change. So let's see what happens. But I think Tashkent will have a multi-dimensional approach, but still with a heavy focus on security. And secondly, very quickly, you cannot ignore these Karakalpak voices. I know right now, in many ways, Tashkent wants to do this. It's like, we don't want to hear this. We don't want, we don't want to recognize the existence of these people. They're crazy, they're emotional, they are irrational, they're illogical. Yeah, you can say all of that, but you cannot ignore their impact. So if you want to communicate with your own people, if you want to have a more effective communication with the world, you cannot ignore those voices. You need to come up with a strategy to deal with them. You have to address them. You cannot pretend as if they don't exist. And these Karakalpak activists also, this is not a monolithical group. They're very diverse. Some of them want Karakalpak Republic. They want another country called Karakalpakstan. Some of them actually see themselves with Kazakhstan. Some of them see a more realistic autonomy in Uzbekistan. They argue that what we have is not an autonomy, actually. We don't really enjoy those rights and powers. So, and then you have Kazakh opposition supported Karakalpaks. You have independent Karakalpaks in places like Poland, in Kyrgyzstan, in Russia. And it would be wrong to say that at least some elements within the political establishments in Russia, in Kazakhstan, and by political establishments, I also mean the opposition, who actually have shown sympathy and support to these Karakalpak activists. And that I know that Tashkent is going to coin as foreign-based, foreign supported elements. And so I think it's going to be really important to to really have to watch what Tashkent does next in terms of how to regard, have a political position on this. And I saw that in the chat, Marlene, some people were mentioning about, let's say, the credibility of the commission. Fine, as I said, this is a parliamentary probe. Uzbekistan parliament has every right to carry out its own investigation. Great, they're doing that now. It's diverse enough, and a lot of people are buying that. The U.S. Embassy in Tashkent has been, cheering that, and others, I know many international experts are also saying, great, that this commission is doing its work. But I would argue, based on someone who has covered these kind of, let's say, investigations, right? We saw that in Kazakhstan. We also saw in Andijan in 2005 that Uzbeks carried out their own investigation, but they never really let other investigations take place. They selected certain foreign experts and allowed them to do these kind of investigations. If Uzbekistan government wants credibility, they very much want a major international credibility. If you want that credibility, then this commission's work won't be enough, even if it is, let's say, if it comes out with, as I guess, describing or concluding on the situation as objectively as it can, it will not be enough based on what we know. Sorry for that, long answer.
No. I think that was you made a really, really great point, and I think the issue of credibility for the government is really important. And if you can, make the point that to improve your general credibility, meaning also like getting more foreign direct investment, and so things that are really important for the government, then you need to accept to have external observer coming and participating in at least part of the discussion. I think it's a very strong point. Temur, Akram?
I have 2 cents to add to this. So I think Navbahor is right about the investigation process. I think it's very important now to have this proper investigation, independent investigation from Parliament and other groups. But at the same time, I would like to underline that the things that Yuri also mentioned, this Temur mentioned about some kind of internal divisions in Uzbek government. Yeah, there were some people ordered to get rid of this article, then some people put it back. And this happened with the journalist of Eurasian Economist journalist when she was in Nukus. First, she was detained by some police officer, then there was an order to release her. I think this shows in a very good way internal problems which we still have in our institute. There are people who are trying to change the system, to push the reforms, but still at the same time, we still have some groups which are maybe still have some kind of old thinking and trying to focus on this, some kind of regime security. And this is very crucial point in all Uzbek reforms. It's true that this response to this unrest in Karakalpakstan is a crucial point in this reforms process. At this point, and I think while Uzbek government is now bringing up a new strategy how to deal with Karakalpakstan, how to deal in general with this kind of uprise of social activism and voices of people. I think it's important, while mentioning all these critical points and while emphasizing on them, I think at the same time it's important to have some kind of encouragement, to keep these people doing their work and to push these reforms, which I fully agree with, which are not going very smoothly. There are many problems, but still there is, as Temur mentioned, and we can see in our everyday life, many things change to the good side, and it's very important to keep this path. But if there will be a lot of criticism, a lot of pressure, of course, and there will be bad response from Uzbek government, and I hope we will not turn to new isolationism. I hope we will choose another direction, and we will be wise enough to elaborate a good strategy. I think we have good signs about this new this kind of commission, about turning on the internet and canceling this emergency situation much advanced than it planned to be canceled. I think that it's now important to keep this trajectory.
Thank you so much, Akram. Yeah, that's also important element to also remember that the regional context is a difficult one, right? So we want to
geography matters. You shouldn't forget where we're located.
You don't want to lose the country or the whole region and push it to a more difficult evolution. Timur.
Yeah, I also wanted to add to all of these talks about separatism. I don't think it's right here to blame bloggers or media for that. I think it's government's fault that it all become inter-ethnical question right now, because if you just put yourself in the shoes of ordinary person from Karakalpakstan, you would see that, you have Karakalpakstan, you have people who live there, they're all ethnically Karakalpak, living compactly in this region. Karakalpak Republic is very important for Uzbekistan, in many spheres, from national resources to logistical. And at the same time, this is the most depressive region. You see that, the quality of life in Karakalpakstan compared to any other region is worse. So it just feels like it's not fair, right? And when you have, another blow from Tashkent to the only thing that you have, your, constitutional right to, if you want to become independent state, even this symbolic, and everyone knows that it's symbolic, right, is taken away from you by Tashkent. So of course you will be mad at the government. So I'm very not happy about talks, being pointing to other groups here, to society or to activists. No, it's the government, and the government should understand that that it's not, right. So about the future, I think it's impossible for modern Uzbekistan to go back to isolation right now. And actually, the protests are the big signal to Uzbekistan that old instruments do not work. You cannot, take away the rights that you have already given to the people. It doesn't work this way. So I think that the only way that Uzbekistan can cope with this crisis and to grow stronger out of this crisis is to change the way the political system works. And here, I also want to echo what Akram has said about how decision-making process right now is not consolidated in one hands. There is a myth that in Uzbekistan president solves every problem, that he makes every single decision, but it's not. We see that there are different people, different groups of people, different institutions that right now have the right, and actually all of those scandals that we discussed are to a certain extent result of decision-making process being dispersed between different people. And I think it's not at the same time right to say that it's president who should do this and that, and other the parliament or other bodies of power in Uzbekistan are powerless. It's not true. The agency of many other institutions is higher right now than ever. Thank you.
Thank you, Timur. Yuri, would you like to add something?
Yes. I would like to start with one thing. All the governments that are in the transition process, even if this transition is not really efficient or partially efficient, all the such governments will face some challenge sooner or later, a crisis. It may be economic crisis, terroristic attack, something that happened in Karakalpakstan as well. So the main thing that demonstrates the government's commitment, real commitment to transition, is when after such crisis, the government continues the transition period and not launches what we can call spillback. So there's spillover effect and the spillback. So trying to find some comfort zone in the past. So like it worked earlier, let's move back to these mechanisms. This is first thing that the government should do. If it's really committed to transforming Uzbekistan and to continue the reform program, it should not try to use the old-fashioned mechanisms like deleting articles from internet, which is really funny because you cannot delete anything from internet. We have screenshots, we have Telegraph, we have Facebook, Telegram, we can copy the text, the author have the electronic version of the text and he can publish it later. So this is something really old-fashioned. It's good that it was solved 45 minutes later. The three articles made a comeback to the internet, but the fact that they tried to do this demonstrates that the government still sometimes is very much how to put it, very likes to find the easiest way from the crisis, not the complicated. And as we know, the complicated way from the crisis is always the most efficient. Second, what the government should do regarding the Karakalpakstan crisis itself is first, as I told, to calm down the media sphere. I mean, not to shut up the media, but to calm down those who remembered that they really care about Uzbekistan's territorial integrity, while they were silent 30 years with the articles concerning Karakalpakstan's status, and those who remembered that they are brothers with Kazakhs, they wanted always to be independent, etc. Because both of these forces will lead to a major conflict that will have real tragic consequences both for them all. And the third one is to deal with these consequences that were already made by a very rational and very pragmatic way. So they should clearly separate the society, the Karakalpak society that had all of the rights to be not to be glad with these amendments, and those who tried to use this situation and benefit from it in order to call for some ambitious initiatives. They were really dead born. This is the three major spheres on which the government, in my opinion, should work to overcome the crisis, because it has already happened. We can't tell now they should not have announced these amendments. They announced, they were silent for a week, they faced a crisis, and now they're trying to deal with the consequences. So the government should face the consequences of its own mistakes and to choose the most rational and pragmatic way to solve them.
Thank you so much, Yuri. So there are a lot of discussion continuing going on in the chat. For me, one of the key questions would be the fact that we have very little knowledge, in fact, of the Karakalpak society, right, and of the activists. So Navbahor, you were mentioning different groups with different political views on what could be, what they would dream, what the dream they have for the future of their region. And so I was wondering, how could we kind of try to help building knowledge on the Karakalpak society? So that would be one direction. The second one is the importance of the diaspora, the Karakalpak diaspora, and how they can help on their side. And then there was a lot of discussion about how the US can help. And I think the point is not only about help in trying to put pressure on the government. I mean, it's important, but there are also kind of more structural issues to look at it, at which kind of economic development can be offered to the region. right, which is in such kind of a depressive social economic situation, which kind of cultural right could be discussed. And Navbahor, you were mentioning the fact that Uzbekistan is a very centralized society, so state, so it's not something that would be easy to do. But I would be interested in if you could kind of try to, each of you, focus more on the Karakalpak society and what it may need as one of the way to kind of continue our discussion, maybe our last round of question.
I can start, if you don't mind. I think emotions have to come down a little bit. You know, we have had a period of highly emotional approach to this, and this applies specifically to Karakalpak activists who are promoting their plight, and they have every right to express themselves. But if you really want to be taken seriously, and I know they may hate to hear this, but this is coming from a very cold-hearted journalist who deals with activists, who gets bombarded with activistic, propaganda on a day-to-day basis. If you want to be heard, you have to have some logic. You have to be logical. Just the claims of genocide or the claims of utter repression and hundreds and thousands of people being killed in Karakalpakstan. If you think that that's something that's going to get international media attention, I'm sorry, it won't. Because it's very hard to deal with people as journalists. I will speak that for myself as well. That when you see things in white and black, you really don't get anywhere. And you may think that this kind of makes a compelling story, but it doesn't, because we need to confirm everything that you're saying. We need to confirm every claim or every allegation you're putting forward. So for, let's say, the Karakalpak diaspora to be heard, to be taken seriously, they need to move from that very emotional state of mind to advocacy, real advocacy, where you have strong arguments about your position, where you have some level of credibility that you can speak on behalf of other Karakalpakstanis. You cannot say that every single resident in Karakalpakstan is not happy. That doesn't make you credible at all. And we hear that a lot. You need to build your own credibility so that others take you seriously, including other international human rights organizations. So I think there, Karakalpak diaspora, I wouldn't actually, I'm very careful about the use of diaspora. I would even argue that there is no such thing as Uzbek diaspora yet. I mean, let's not really overrate them yet. I mean, these are cultural communities. These are cultural groups who are trying to survive in various countries. So let's say Karakalpak, refugees or, political activists abroad, they need to really also do their own rethinking. How do we really, promote our message? What is our message? What do we really want? And how connected we are with the rest of Karakalpakstan? Now, what I'm expecting from this commission's report and other statements from the Uzbek government, based on what we know, there will be a narrative in Tashkent and in Nukus that the people of Karakalpakstan never wanted this. They're very happy. They're quite happy with the status quo, and that whatever needs to be done, we know already. We need to develop Karakalpakstan. We will, build our trust with the Karakalpak people, and we'll have a very constructive approach. That means the Karakalpaks outside of Uzbekistan, outside of Karakalpakstan, will have to really listen to that and then gauge. So, and for us and for people like you and me, Marlene, we just need to, our challenge is to find those credible voices. Our challenge is really find those logical voices. And it's always hard. I mean, that's what we do, right? On a day-to-day basis. For the US and Ambassador Hoagland, I saw that a very, well-respected veteran diplomat, and, he knows really what he's talking when he's asking this question. I would say focus on Karakalpakstan as the focus of development, right? We know that USAID does projects there. We also know that UN is heavily involved in the Aral Sea area. At least like 10 agencies are involved there. So yes, focus on the development, but I think Washington has a very specific role here to play, especially when it comes to human rights. So Washington could facilitate that constructive dialogue, discussion between the US-based international human rights groups and the Uzbek government. And I know that the Uzbek embassy in Tashkent has already been trying to do some of that, and we'll see where these discussions lead. But I think there US has a special role. And I don't think US will put pressure on Tashkent. Washington, the Biden administration is not about pressure. They're about these cordial, mutual interest-based approach where they really want to make sure that reforms continue. Yeah, sometimes slow than they want to, but they want this pace to kind of this course to continue. So that's something I think is really important. And Markovitz, Larry also asked a very interesting question, which I think is very much tied to this, the use of repression, the use of force in Uzbekistan. And I think, Larry, this will actually make a really interesting case study. You know, we need to go in and study Karakalpakstan. This is how we will know what's really happening there. We need to engage others as well. But I think studying Kazakhstan as a subject is really important now. And what I saw initially in Nukus from the images that were emerging in late June, we saw that people were gathering and the Uzbek security forces, the internal affairs officers, militia, they were not necessarily aggressively responding. I got tons and tons of video where they were just watching and they were trying to keep order. That surprised me because I wouldn't expect that. I would expect that, you know, the security forces will go full force to stop these people. And the fact that thousands of people gathered at the heart of Nukus and we saw security officers, I mean, the security service worked differently than before. And I've heard from many, many sources in the Uzbek government that the order from the highest echelons, including, you know, definitely from President Mirziyoev, was not to shoot and was not to really hurt innocent people. If that is true, then the Uzbek government, I would argue, should be more comfortable letting independent investigators to go in and bring out that truth. If the security forces were ordered not to hurt or not to target innocent people or peaceful protesters, then you have nothing to be afraid of. Let the truth come out. The commission may say that, but it won't be enough, as I've been saying. Other, you know, more independent, impartial voices should bring that voice out. And in the Uzbek narrative that's been promoted on domestic media so far, we have heard many security officials and security officers, some wounded, telling that we were really under a lot of pressure not to hurt people. But some things happened, some things got out of our control. So some things went wrong there. And I think, again, the independent, impartial, as credible as possible, you know, credible research would bring out that truth. But I think the security services acted differently. The government approached this differently. And many people in Tashkent, including analysts, are concluding that, you know, President Mirziyoev acted very differently than, let's say, Islam Karimov would have acted. You know, for Islam Karimov, protests were a big no-no. Shoot down, you know, and use of force was the norm. Whereas for Mirziyoev, they argue that Mirziyoev is not about the use of disproportional force. But that's something that we need to see the proof of. And for that, you know, we need to study. For that, we need to dig more.
Thank you, Navbahor. Timur, would you like to add on that?
Yeah, first of all, I also agree about the diaspora, and I love, Navbahor, your lecture on this. I watched it, yes. I agree with Navbahor that you know, there are many takes right now that what happened in Karakalpakstan is Mirziyoyev's Andijan, but I wouldn't agree because you know, of course, we know that even right now, many people are in prison. We know about more than 20 casualties. We know about, you know, a lot of people being in jail, but still, it's not compared to what was happening in 2005. I wouldn't even say that it's because you know, political regime is softer or more liberal, I think that the world has changed. For modern world where you have technologies, you have internet, you have phones. Every single person has phones. Even if you shut down the internet, all of it will come out one day. And even right now, when the internet was shut down in Karakalpakstan, we still have so many videos, so many information from the people on the ground. Of course, we cannot prove that because independent journalists were not covering, and the government actually didn't allow the local journalists to cover it. But still, it doesn't have the same scale, if I can put it rightly. But I don't know what to say to local activists, because I think it's not a secret that it's impossible to do any kind of activism, let alone political activism in Uzbekistan. Even after years of reforms, it's very difficult to establish NGO. It's becoming even more difficult, considering that a couple of months ago, the government announced a new law that NGOs have to, when they have foreign funding, they have to find local partner, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's really tough being activists in Uzbekistan and in Karakalpakstan as well. And that is why I think that what we see, all of those voices that are being heard from Karakalpakstan is from those people who kind of don't have any other way out, and that is why it seems very dramatic to some people. It's very difficult. I think it's very sensitive for many in the chat, and I do believe that we should talk more with people from the ground, and we should have more events with people from Karakalpakstan to understand what it's like to be someone living there, and someone trying to be activist, someone trying to fight for rights of people on the ground. Because from the outside, it seems very calm region that nothing happens there, but in reality it's not. And in reality, if you open the reports of international human rights organizations, the OSCE chapter on the human rights, you will see that there are many people around the world who are from Karakalpakstan, who try to do something about the rights of people there. And they publish reports about people being detained, couple of hundreds, even today, for some political activism in the past. So I really wanted, sorry for being chaotic, but I really want to say that it's really tough for the people out there, and I think this is the reason why we don't have the the kind of objective and resultful actions from them.
Thank you, Timur. We still have 10 minutes, so I would like to have Akram and Yuri giving some last comments. And I wanted to add on that in August, we will be organizing an event specifically on Karakalpak society and with Karakalpak voices. So we are preparing that event. And as you said, I think it's very important to put the light on the region, to gather more knowledge, and to give the floor to people from the region. Akram, a few last words.
I completely agree with the previous points of Navbahor and Temur about the need for the further talks and discussion. And that's one of the reasons why this crisis happened, because the lack of communication with the people. I think it should be clearly should be a lesson for the Uzbek government and taken seriously by establishing the new mechanisms of communicating, not just the branches of presidential administration in provinces who listen to the people and who collect some complaints, and some other types, not just sending some ministers for a couple of weeks to the regions to listen to people. It's important, but system should work also as in whole, not just one-time listening and solving some immediate problems, but in a longer term to build a system, institutions which will deal with this. And this leads us to other discussion. Yeah? We need more decentralization. Yeah? If these kind of decisions were clearly discussed and proved on a local level first before going to the national level, I think we would avoid many other problems. And at the same time, I think, again, we need more discussion on this and talk, not both with Karakalpak people, we should have more expert discussion on this and to figure out the further strategy, how to solve this issue and prevent it further to elaborating to something more difficult and complicated. And in these terms, I think it's important also cooperation on as international organization with other countries. But again, it should be very, it should be discussion and not one-sided kind of dictate. Yeah, you should do this, and this list of requirements, and you should follow them. Yeah, there should be clear discussion and agreement on this, how to do this and what would be more credible. And I agree that trying to compare this situation with some other events in Uzbek history is not the best decision of to solve this problem. I think we need different approach to this. The fact that the leadership acknowledged the problem, the mistake, and reversed it is a big concession. As other speakers said, you couldn't expect something similar in previous years of Uzbek state. I think we should go further from this point and try to build trust between the different ethnicities and also between the different provinces. Thank you.
Thank you, Akram. Yuri?
A few points. First of all, I don't think we should really make a big division between so-called old Uzbekistan and new Uzbekistan. It's the same system, just acting somewhere softer, somewhere trying to be more pleasant for international community, etc., but making the same mistakes that are related to a poor decision-making process and poor efficiency of the institutions. So when some people say, and Akram just mentioned that perhaps this mistake would not happen, would have been dealt with in another way in previous years. Perhaps this mistake would not even be made in previous years, because in 1990s they gave this status to Karakalpakstan and they were rationalizing this somehow. Second point, while my colleagues were talking, I was scanning through the chat and we can see there how this small bureaucratic mistake provoked such declarations as we want to leave Uzbekistan, and you are free to go, but leave us the lands, etc. Again, these discussions will lead only to very tragic consequences for both parts. And the third one, I think our country, our state should work on the following. We should shift personification of decision-making process towards the institutionalization of it, because we should have institutions that work institutions that make decisions and institutions that later are responsible for these decisions, not personality that makes the decision, another personality that is decided to be the responsible one and removed, and etc. So Uzbekistan needs institutions that will be that will work without depending on people who are ruling them. So we should move from personified regime towards institutionalized.
Thank you so much. That's a great way to conclude, I think, our discussion. I wanted to thank all of you for your great insight, and thanks our participants who were some very lively, and just to remind that it's always better in an academic context to be collegial and cordial in the chat discussion and to avoid ad hominem accusation, because they are not helping the cause. So as I said, thank you once again for your great insight. It was indeed, it's a very sensitive topic, and we all understand how the situation is tense on the ground for all the citizens of Uzbekistan, and especially the Karakalpaks right now. And we hope to reconvene sometime in August for the only Karakalpak centered discussion, and trying to give the floor to people from the region about what is going on, but also more broadly about the situation culturally and social economically of the Karakalpak region. Thank you so much once again, and hope to see you very soon in one of our other events. Thank you all.
Thank you.